And welcome back to the second portion of this lesson we're doing on Greek mythology and literature. So yesterday we talked about how the Greeks came up with mythology and different Greek gods to explain natural events that occurred, whether they were natural disasters or things like the seasons. And today we're going to get into a little bit more about their literature and how we still know about them. So ancient Greek literature. Because the Greeks loved myths and stories, it's no surprise that they created a lot of great works of literature. Early Greek writers produced long epic poems, romantic poetry, and some of the world's most famous stories are created by the Greeks, the ancient Greeks. Homer, for example, is one of the greatest writers of ancient Greece. He created two stories that are very well known, the Iliad and the Odyssey. So among the earliest Greek writers are two great epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey, by a poet known as Homer. Like most epics, both poems describe the deeds of great heroes. So the heroes in Homer's poems fought in the Trojan War. In this great war, the Mycenaean Greeks fought the Trojans, people of the city called Troy. And the Iliad tells the story of the last years of the Trojan War, and it focuses on one specific Greek known as Achilles, and he was the greatest of all Greek warriors. And it describes in great detail the battles between the Greeks and the Trojan enemies. The Odyssey, on the other hand, describes the challenges that the Greek hero Odysseus faced on his way home from the war. So for 10 years after the war ends, Odysseus tries to get home, but many obstacles stand in his way. He had to fight his way past terrible monsters, powerful magicians, and even angry gods. So both of these stories, the Iliad and the Odyssey, focus around the Trojan War. Epic poetry to the Greeks. So both the Iliad and the Odyssey are great tales of adventure. To the Greeks, Homer's poems were more than just entertainment. They were a central part of education. People memorized long portions of the poems as part of lessons in school as well as for adults. They admired Homer's poems, and they also admired the heroes that were described in these. They were seen as symbols of great pieces of history of Greece. Homer's poems influenced later writers. Many writers copied his writing styles. They borrowed from his stories and also from his ideas. Homer's poems are considered some of the greatest literary works ever produced. Lyric poetry. So other poems were written by poets, and they would write this poetry set to music. During a performance, the poet played a stringed instrument known as a lyre while reading the poem. And you might have seen a lyre in different cartoons and in different movies. You can see Ariel holding one right there, and on the far right you can see what one really looks like. These poets were called lyric poets after the instrument, the lyre. And today, the words of songs are known as lyrics after these ancient Greek poets. Most poets in Greece were men, but the most famous lyrical poet was a woman named Sappho. Her poems were beautiful and emotional, and most of her poems were about love and relationships with her friends and family. So, a little bit also about fables. Other Greeks told stories to teach people important lessons. Aesop, for example, is a very famous writer and famous for his fables. Fables are short stories that teach the reader lessons about life or give advice on how to live. In most of Aesop's fables, animals are the main characters, and the animals talk and act just like humans. One of Aesop's most famous stories is a tale of the ant and the grasshopper, which I'll read for you. The ants were spending a fine winter's day drying grain collected in the summertime. A grasshopper, perishing, dying with famine, hunger, passed by and earnestly, eagerly, begged for a little food. The ants inquired or asked him, "Why did you not treasure up food during the summer?" He replied, "I had not leisure enough. I passed the days in singing." They then said in derision, "If you were foolish enough to sing all summer, you must dance supperless to bed in the winter." And what basically they're saying in this story is that the grasshopper played and sang and jumped around all summer long instead of collecting food, while the ants collected up all this food. Now, in wintertime, the grasshopper is desperate for food and he's trying to get some from the ants. And the ants are like, "Dude, you should have collected up food when you had time. Now you don't have it. The food we have is for us. Now you're going to have to go to bed on an empty stomach." The lesson in the fable is that people shouldn't waste time when they should be working. And those who do, Aesop says, will be sorry. So those who waste time when they're supposed to be working are going to be sorry. Another fable by Aesop is known as The Tortoise and the Hare. And this one teaches that it's better to work slowly and carefully than to be hurrying up and end up making mistakes. The Boy Who Cried Wolf is also another story made by Aesop, and that teaches don't play pranks on people, don't play jokes and lie and try to get attention when nothing's really going on, because when something does happen, people aren't going to believe you. Since we still read these fables, you may be familiar with some of them today. Greek literature lives. The works of ancient Greek writers such as Homer on the left, Sappho in the middle, and Aesop on the right are still alive and popular today. In fact, Greek literature has influenced modern language, literature, and art. Did you know that some of the words you use and some of the stories you hear come from ancient Greece? We've got some examples in the next slide. Language. So, for example, I put up here 2001: A Space Odyssey. The word Odyssey has come to mean a long journey because of Odysseus. So probably the most obvious ways that we see influence of Greeks is in our language. Many English words and expressions come from Greek mythology. As I told you, Odyssey comes from the name Odysseus, or the wandering hero in Homer's poem. Something very large and powerful can be referred to as Titanic. Titanic, as we know it, was this massive ship, but even as you see in the middle here, the title itself is a play on words, The Titanic Secret. The word comes from Titans, or a group of large and powerful gods in Greek myth. Many places around the world today are also named after figures from Greek myths. For example, Athens is from the goddess Athena, the goddess of wisdom. The Atlas Mountains in Africa were named after the Greek god Atlas. The name the Aegean Sea is from Aegeus, the legendary Greek king. Europe itself is named after the princess Europa. And even places in space bear names of mythology. I think it's one of the most common places, believe it or not. We're not as familiar with it because we haven't learned about astronomy very much. But many planets are named after Greek gods, such as Jupiter. Jupiter's moon Io is also named after the goddess's daughter. Literature and the arts. So Greek myths have inspired artists for centuries. Greek painters and sculptors have used gods and heroes as subjects of their works. Writers have retold ancient stories, sometimes set in modern times. So sometimes a writer might create a modern spin on an old epic, a Greek epic. Movie makers have also borrowed stories from ancient myths. There are a lot of examples of Disney classic cartoons. A lot of them have come from ancient Greece. Mythological references are also common in today's popular culture. Many sports teams have adopted their names like Titans or Trojans. Businesses frequently use images and symbols from mythology in their advertising. And although people no longer believe in the Greek gods, mythological ideas can still be seen all around us. So that's our second video. I'll be back tomorrow with a review video going over some of the more important points that we've done so that you can finish this up and start preparing yourself for the test. Thanks for watching and have a great day.